From the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball, I thought there were a lot of better things on the defensive side of the ball. I think the one thing that we'll nitpick, and then we'll get into some of the good stuff, is the thing that we've been talking about in Atlanta for the last 10 years, and that is the pass rush. Now, the Falcons did have 2 sacks. Grady Jarrett played very, very well. But outside of that, even Matthew Judon, he did have a half sack, but there just wasn't a lot of pressure on the quarterback. He had 2 sacks, not the worst thing in the world, but there wasn't pressure on the quarterback. Like Justin Fields typically had all the time in the world, and a lot of the times it was just like a perfectly clean pocket, as much time as he wanted. That was my biggest negative takeaway from a day where they didn't give up a touchdown, and the Falcons had 3 turnovers, right? So they weren't in like the best positions all game. You don't give up a touchdown, you pretty much stop them from driving on several of these drives where they have to make 50, 60-yard field goals. I mean, Boswell was unbelievable. He was the MVP of the game for the Steelers, but you don't give up a touchdown, you should win it. You should win every single game, especially at home.
Yeah, and I think the pass rush is going to be something that's going to be, kind of a work in progress. Not really, it's going to be different week to week. Where Matthew Judon is great, and he's a good pass rusher. But like when we traded for him, I said it, like he's not a guy that you can, count on one-on-one like TJ Watt you can, or Myles Garrett. Like he's a schematic pass rusher where you're going to have to scheme him up, where you have some stunts, some twists across the line of scrimmage, and he's very good in that sense. He's the kind of guy that, he doesn't really have a ton of pass rush moves, but he can absolutely push the pocket back. And I think, it was, a combination of the Falcons pass rush is never going to be a top 10 unit, but it's also Justin Fields is incredibly difficult to sack. Like it's incredibly difficult to sack Justin Fields, and I think the Steelers' offensive line should be credited too. They threw that unit together on Friday night, pretty much, and they performed really, really well. And in that same sense, it's got to be better. But I think the Falcons' defense. If you're sitting here, blaming the Falcons' defense, we watched a completely different game. I think they did really, really well. I think the one thing I wish, maybe Jimmy Lake did a little bit more was just sell out to stop the run, drop a safety down in the box and, force Arthur Smith to make Justin Fields throw it. He had a couple of nice passes, all of them on A.J. Terrell, reminded that, A.J. Terrell is not the best cornerback in football. He's really, really good. He's not the best. George Pickens, I'd say he won that day on Sunday, but I think all in all, we are nitpicking. I mean, A.J. Terrell, he walks away from that game looking a lot worse than he really is because the Falcons lost the football game. I mean, Kirk Cousins is turning the ball over, and then the Falcons defense gets out there and immediately forces the Steelers to punt the ball. Like, you can't keep putting your defense in terrible positions and expecting them to, come away with 3 points, which they did. I mean, this was a defensive effort top to bottom, in my opinion. No failing grades, all passing grades. Some were C's, some were A's. The second level, Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, Nate Lehman, they looked really good. Troy Anderson looked really, really good. The safety duo looked really, really good. I think all in all, the Steelers didn't score a touchdown. Generally speaking, when you force a team into all field goals, you win that football game. I don't know how anybody could be sitting here and saying the Falcons defense is the reason why, or, was a primary contributor and the reason why the Falcons lost. It's just not true.
Yeah, the Steelers didn't score a touchdown and the Falcons threw the ball over 3 times.
Yeah.
That's you should win those games. I mean, I think, I agree with you. I think the biggest standout though for me, and it was great to see, was Grady Jarrett. Now we just become accustomed to this guy going out there and showing out. He has a sack and a half coming off that ACL injury, year 10 or 11 or whatever he's in. It's almost crazy that he's been around for so long, but the guy is just an absolute animal, and he brings it every single week. And I saw a picture on our little thing of him kind of shaking hands with Arthur Smith, and you can kind of see the disgust in his face, and you're just like, we
should have gotten a win for him.
I mean, this guy needs to be on a winning football team. I mean, he deserves it more than any other player in this organization, more than probably anybody other in the sports, because they just have never been good, except for when he was a young player. And I just hope he gets that opportunity. I mean, because he was a superstar. He looked like a guy that literally coming off an ACL, you wonder how that's going to happen, especially later in your career. Looked like an absolute animal, an absolute stud. So that was really good to see. About the only negative I think you could say is the pass rush, but still, I mean, it's way too many positives.
You're really nitpicking.
Way too many
they still held the Steelers defense to like less than 250 total yards. Again, that's an incredible performance in today's NFL where offenses are averaging at least 290 yards. Like those are the bad offenses. Good offenses average like 310. Yeah. So, that's a good outing from a defense that we, similar to the offense, there was a lot of new faces and there was a new coordinator, and Jimmy Lake, I think he did a fine job. I think Arthur Smith dialed up plays, timely plays to get good conversions or good chunk plays when they needed them the most. But overall, I think, the Falcons defense and Jimmy Lake did a very good job. I think, 9 times out of 10, you win that football game with that outing.
Yeah, unfortunately, this just wasn't that time. But listen, next week's going to present a very different task for both teams. You got an Eagles defense that showed a lot of holes when they played the Packers, but they have an offense that can score a lot more points. So we'll kind of get a reverse of what we have. We'll have a good test for the defense, and hopefully the offense can show a little more life. If they don't, it is going to be a long day on Monday Night Football at Lincoln Financial Field.